Okay, hello and welcome everyone. We're going to get started, but first, some introductions. My name is Jonathan, and I'm one of the mentors from Koinonia Christian Fellowship. And today I am joined by my friend and fellow mentor, Wilson, who will be sharing with y'all how to prepare and study for organic chemistry at UT.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me here today. And thank you everyone who's watching right now for joining us in this Ochem webinar.
So we know that you guys might be feeling anxious about Ochem this semester, especially since you might have heard how hard it is, or there's a lot of memorization to it, which is why we wanted to provide this webinar as a resource for you guys.
Yeah, and so we hope that through this webinar, you can learn all the tips and tricks of studying for Ochem so that you can get that A.
We also know that you guys may have questions after or even during the webinar. So feel free to ask us during the chat using the chat on the right, and one of us can answer them as soon as possible.
Also, if you guys want to ask anonymously, we also have a form in the link below in the description. And you can submit your questions there as well.
But first, you may be wondering why you should listen to us. So both Wilson and I have graduated with biochemistry degrees at UT, and we've gotten A's in both Ochem 1 and Ochem 2. On top of that, Wilson is currently a pharmacy student at UT and applying some of that Ochem into practice. Wilson, would you share a little bit more about your credentials?
Sure. So on top of everything you've said, Jonathan, I've also tutored Ochem for 2 years in UT Sanger Learning Center. So I have a good idea about what most students struggle with. I've also briefly worked in Dr. Iverson's organic chemistry lab for one summer. And finally, and I don't know if this is really a credential, but I actually really like Ochem. Like, it was one of my favorite subjects during my undergrad.
As you can tell, Wilson is really passionate about Ochem, and that is to your advantage. Hopefully you can see that we are reliable resources ready to help you get that A in Ochem. And so without further ado, let's get started. Wilson and I have prepared 4 tips for you guys on how to best study for this class. Wilson, why don't you start us off?
Of course. But before I talk about tip 1, let me share with you tip 0. And that is Ochem is not like Gen Chem. So this isn't really a study tip, more of a mindset. So what do I mean? So most people come into Ochem thinking it's going to be an extension of Gen Chem, and that's just not true. So in Gen Chem, you learn something like this. You learn chemistry concepts, but you also do a lot of math. You know, you have an equation, and then you have to balance the reactants and the products, and then you do some plug and chug, and then maybe some stoichiometry, and bam, then you get an answer at the end. Yeah, you do none of that in Ochem. And in fact, if I recall, I don't remember if we did any kind of math in Ochem.
Yeah, which might be good news for some people.
Yeah, for some people, that might be good news. But in Ochem, you might learn something a little bit more like this. So you learn organic chemistry principles, and then you learn some nomenclature, which is like how to name molecules. And then you learn reaction mechanisms, which is what I think most people find hard about Ochem. And meanwhile, you'll be drawing a lot of molecules, like a lot of molecules.
Yeah, that is so true. There is a lot of drawing. Also, you mentioned the word mechanism. Could you explain what that is for people who might not know?
Sure. So a reaction mechanism is pretty much like a step-by-step process of how a reaction takes place. So in Gen Chem, you might just learn the overall reaction equation, but in Ochem, we're more interested about how that reaction works step by step.
Yep, I totally agree. And so back to tip 0. In summary, Ochem is not like Gen Chem. Approach it as if it were a completely different class.
Exactly. So with that, the one thing that does transfer over from Gen Chem are the concepts, which brings me to tip 1, which is review your chemistry concepts. Now, I know this might sound a little bit contradictory, but I'm not saying like forget chemistry. I'm saying that to best understand organic chemistry, you have to understand your basic chemistry concepts very well. And I'm talking about stuff like electronegativity, intermolecular forces, Vesper models, and acid-base chemistry.
Oh, wait, but for acid-base chemistry, you don't have to do all that titration and calculation stuff, right?
Oh no, oh no, 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 forget that, no. I'm just talking about like just understanding like pH and pKa. I'm not, you don't have to do all that math stuff. But going back to like just tip one, like the reason why I talk about this is because the majority of Ochem is about reactions and mechanisms. And I feel like a lot of people just try to memorize a bunch of reactions without, fully understanding why it works. And that's why a lot of people just say that Ochem is just a bunch of memorization. So the goal of Ochem is really to understand it, not really just to memorize it. And that way it'll just make it a lot easier. So for example, let's say we have like this thing that right here, how to form an alkane or alkyne, sorry. So let's suppose that you could just remember like, oh, just this reaction and I need an NaNH2, but rather than just memorize it, I think it'll be more helpful to think about like, okay, so I have this molecule right here and I have this molecule right here and I want to make an alkyne. And one has more hydrogens and the other one has less hydrogens. And so perhaps in order to remove those hydrogens, I just need a strong base like NaNH2. So this way you're not just memorizing, but you're kind of reasoning out organic chemistry.
Hey, that's really helpful. So I guess what do you recommend for our viewers right now so they can start practicing this tip?
So of course, you'll be reviewing some Gen Chem concepts during the beginning of Ochem, and you'll also be learning a lot of concepts as the class progresses. But for now, I recommend just briefly reviewing those Gen Chem concepts before the first day of class, especially if you've forgotten a lot of those topics or if you're just not very strong at them. So yeah, just like what I said before, I'm just reviewing these 4 basic concepts. I think is a good start: electronegativity, IMF, Vesper models, and acid-base chemistry. And even provided a resource here. UT has made a website where you can review all of them. It's on genchem.cm.utexas.edu.
Yeah, and personally, I felt like because I understood those basic chemistry concepts well, learning OChem and all the reactions and mechanisms weren't too difficult. All right, let's move on to tip number 2.
All right, so for tip number 2, my advice is invest in a molecular model kit. So in OChem, you'll be drawing a lot of molecules, and on top of that, when learning the mechanism, you have to like maybe turn or flip the molecule or rotate the bond in your head. So when I was tutoring Ochem in Sanger Learning Center, I found that a good number of students actually struggled with that kind of molecular visualization. So I found that molecular model kits like this helped to actually physically see the molecular shape rather than just trying to like imagine it in your head or try to like see it on a 2D sheet of paper. And yeah, so that's why I recommend trying investing in this. And of course, this might not be a tip for everyone because some people just might not have a hard time visualizing molecules in their head. So, but if you find that you have a hard time, I do recommend this.
Wilson, is there a particular model kit you would recommend?
Actually, not really. So as long as it's above 4 stars, then it's fine. So in general, they do cost around $20, $30. I did do a little bit of research, and the one you see right here, that's a good balance of price and quality. And if you guys are interested in purchasing one, the Amazon link is below.
Great. So I have a question. Suppose someone has trouble visualizing molecules in their head, but they can't afford a model kit. Are there any resources for those kind of people?
Of course. So there is this website right here that can help with molecular visualization, and it's completely free. It's called moleview.org. And I could show you a demo right now. So if you go right here, and once it loads, so we have a molecule right here, and you can rotate the molecule like this. So this is a good way to help, just visualize the molecule a little bit better. And it is a little bit 2D, but it is something, and you can also draw the molecule on this program. So of course, I do feel like the physical model is better, but if you are a little bit financially tight, then this is another good resource.
Great. How about we move on to the next tip?
Sure. So for my tip number 3, it is that whenever you're studying, always draw the mechanisms. So I say this before tip 4, and spoiler alert, tip 4 is using flashcards and roadmaps to memorize reactions. So in organic chemistry, again, a lot of reactions to remember, and I think you're just going to have a miserable time if you're just going to be studying and memorizing all of these reactions without fully understanding how it works. So when studying, I always advise to draw out the mechanism. In fact, I believe that after class, I recommend drawing the mechanism like as soon as possible or after class if you can. So like how I usually do it is that you learn the top reaction in class. What I would do is just erase the intermediate steps and just try to fill in the blanks. And this way you're going to really reinforce learning all those reactions. If you don't have time after class, then you can just draw it later during the same day.
Yeah, and to add on to that, it's just really a good study tip in general. Studies show that reviewing your notes a few hours after learning helps you retain more than 50% of the material, whereas reviewing your notes after a day leads only to about 20% of retention.
Yeah, I've heard that tip too. So pretty much just study early.
Yeah, and I guess drawing the mechanisms after class will help you memorize the mechanisms more easily anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, yeah. But for me, the goal of drawing the mechanism is actually not to memorize it, or not exactly just to memorize it, but it's really to understand the patterns of organic chemistry. So for example, like in this reaction right here, let's say let's focus on this mechanism right here. So let's say you have this electron-rich molecule right here, and you also have this electron-poor area of the molecule right here. So, based on this pattern, the bond most likely would form there. So just in general, I would like to tell a story about this. So there were a couple times during the exam, I just forgot one of the reactions. So like I remembered the reagents, but I didn't know what the final product was. And because of that, but because I was familiar with, the patterns of the reaction mechanisms, I just kind of redrew the mechanism and figured it out during the exam. So yeah, pretty much the goal of drawing the mechanism is really to understand the pattern. So that way you don't have to have so much burden just trying to memorize all the reactions. You can almost maybe even figure it out on your own.
Yeah, so the takeaway from that is drawing the mechanism can help you learn the patterns of Ochem reactions. All right, we're going to move on now to tip number 4.
All right, yeah. And so finally, tip number 4 is to make flashcards and roadmaps. So during the last exam of Ochem 1 and on every exam of Ochem 2, you'll be running across a special type of exam problem called the synthesis problem. So what this is that you have a starting molecule and then you have an end molecule, and then you have to determine all the reactions in between leading up to that final molecule. And in order to do this, you got to be knowledgeable of all the reactions that you've learned, and that will be your toolkit to help produce that final molecule. And so my advice is that in order to memorize all these reactions, after drawing all the mechanisms, don't forget tip 3, you want to start memorizing all these reactions. And I advise with flashcards, put the reagents in the front and then the product in the back, and then you can try memorizing like that. But personally, I mentioned another thing, and I think it's more crucial, is to build or draw a roadmap. And it looks something like this. So, and this is where you take all the reactions that you've learned and you try linking them together. And this way you can have this visual of how to get from one molecule to another molecule in any path. And yeah, I know, looking at this roadmap, it does look a little bit daunting, but there's one easy way to think about this. So I try to imagine like thinking of all your reaction pathways like an actual map. There are a lot of roads, but the main roads you want to know about are really the highways like I-35. So in the same way, to make sense of the Ochem roadmap, you try to imagine, your major cities, like which would in Ochem 1 would be like your alkynes, your alkenes, your alkanes. Those are the main cities. And then you have your highway. And then that will be your central way of memorizing all the other reactions, and because all the other reactions are kind of like the side roads. So that's one advice to, you know, try to make sense of the roadmaps.
Yeah, and so to recap, these are the 4 tips along with a bonus tip in tip 0. And they are, Ochem is not like GenChem. Tip number 1, don't forget those chemistry concepts. 2, invest in a molecular bottle kit. 3, always draw the mechanisms. And lastly, use flashcards and roadmaps. Great, so thank you, Wilson, for sharing these studying tips with us and giving us a picture of what Ochem looks like at UT.
Of course. And I know for all you guys watching, I know you guys have a lot more specific questions about organic chemistry that I just haven't covered. And I also know that once class starts, you'll have a lot more questions as well. So I know if you want to ask some of them, or maybe if you want just some like help, you can, or if you just want to get connected with us, you know, you can just click the link below in the description. It should bring you to our sign up form and, you know, our questions form. You can just fill that out if you have any more questions. And also, I've also mentioned a lot of resources while going through this webinar. So I've also put that down in the description and in the links below.
Yeah, thanks, Wilson. Finally, I just want to share an announcement about our group. This coming Monday, our group Koinonia is hosting one of the biggest events of the year called New Student Welcome Night. Don't let the name fool you. This event is for all students, and it's a great way to start the year meeting new people and hearing about others' experiences as they have gone through UT. We will have a virtual program lined up and also a free meal afterwards for you guys to pick up, and it's on us. It will be from some of the local favorites like In-N-Out and Cabo Bob's. Hopefully we will get to meet and connect with some of you guys through that. And with that, thank you so much for joining us in our How to Study for Ochem webinar. Thanks for joining and hope to see you guys again.